from the authorities that there would be some change. The pressure for reform is gathering pace and is gathering support. The difference is between capitalism and communism is very strong, maybe concrete and barbed wire. We want another way to attack our society. On the streets of East German cities, scores of people demanding democratic reforms, with random security police dragging individuals from the crowd, beating them over the head, throwing them out of the corridor.
J'étais sur la radio suspendu pour écouter l'effondrement du système communiste de l'Est. Et puis j'étais étudiant à voyager en Roumanie, en Hongrie, en Russie. Je sais très bien de l'intérieur, en effet, qu'il y a eu cet effondrement. J'ai vu un système économique et social qui est en état de faillite complète. Un système politique qui avait promis l'émancipation individuelle qui en fait se retrouvait à produire de la misère, la répression politique. Lorsque cette imposition, la promesse communiste est apparue, cette effondrée, ça a beaucoup renforcé le discours capitaliste au sens général. Le problème, c'est que ça a été trop loin. La chute du Union soviétique a conduit à une foi infinie dans la dérégulation des marchés. Ça a aussi été de pair avec une nouvelle sacralisation de la propriété privée. Et à cause de ça, on a des défis inégalitaires importants et aussi une unité, nationalisme, une tension xénophobe, comme on pouvait en avoir dans 13 militaires pendant la Première Guerre mondiale. On est très peur parce que ce que j'observe, c'est le risque de revenir à un système socialiste après différence de celui 13 militaire du 18e et du 19e. La société du 18e siècle est une société où le capital est vraiment concentré dans un petit groupe de personnes. L'aristocratie représente 1% de la population. Ce sont des frontières d'argent qui limitent la mobilité sociale. Et donc, le travail gratuit ne permet pas de détrer. On se voit souvent la littérature, le film, la culture populaire, avec puissance évocatrice l'importance du capital à travers l'histoire, qui nous raconte une histoire qui est plus sombre que cette vision idyllique de l'arche, le progrès, la lumière.
In the 18th century, life of the poor is grim. If you're lucky, you might be a servant. Everyone else is a hand-to-mouth labourer, moving from place to place all over the world, being treated by the landowners exactly as they please. And of course, there are no benefits, there's no health service, there's no free schooling, there's absolutely nothing. So poverty is a death sentence. And what's very striking is the average life expectancy in the 18th century is 17.
At the time, what capital really looks like is money lending and land owning. You have a guy that sits in a fort and basically claims taxes on all the people that work his land. And we sort of know what that looks like from all kinds of movies.
Really, what I get from these business, I can have your my bedroom bills. What about Roulet? Has he paid his rent? Roulet died last week. He died with his rent unpaid. Or what did he die of? Hunger. Hunger is an indulgence for these peasants. Why keep putting together? You're humanitarian, aren't you? You think that one person is as good as another? A naive notion, so contradicted by the facts.
In a rich inheritance is succession. It's a very strict code. The eldest son gets the capital. He gets everything. He gets the money, he gets the house, he gets the land, and that makes him incredibly powerful just in an accident of birth. These landowning men, these first sons, they also have huge amounts of political power, because a lot of them are the MPs, they're elites. And as a consequence, they are driven by a desire to protect their own income, to protect their own world. And it simply doesn't occur to them that poor people deserve some redistribution of wealth. Taxation they resist very strongly. And this is the way that the aristocracy work, not just in Britain, but all through Europe. And the aim is to conserve the aristocratic power. The examples that Thomas Witty has, Jane Austen and Balzac, they're very fitting, because when you read Jane Austen, it is all about money. And this money is not earned through work, it's not earned through owning businesses, it's earned through land, it's inherited land. Mr. Darcy, for example, in Pride and Prejudice, he has this huge estate. He doesn't even have to be there. This land just creates money for him.
How good of you to come.
It's miserable for so where it may be, but it's already certainly not. It'll be £10,000 a year, and he earns that partnership. Miserable, huh? Jane Austen creates a fantasy that you could get your hands on this wealth, you're just a bit fun, a bit witty. But the reality is, there's no way Mr. Darcy would marry girls like Lizzie Bennet, who actually haven't got a penny to their names. He would marry an heiress, possibly even a cousin, who create this megalopolis estate. Money marries money. There's nothing to do with love. And what we see now, almost cycling back to the 18th century. In Britain, inherited wealth is everything. Again, nowadays, 1% of the population owns 70% of our land. There's always been an elite, which is usually adept at reproducing its privilege through generations, monopolising both economic and social and cultural capital. The way the elite stays in power and passes on their privilege to the next generation is also by shaping the way that we think. Traditionally, economists have argued that inequality is a very powerful driver of progress and innovation because the idea is a competition essentially makes people try harder. The problem is that extreme inequality increasingly seems to be a source of great economic stress, social stress, and political stress. Because if you have a situation where an elite are so rigidly protective of their ranks and nobody can ever rise, there's no social mobility, you tend to end up with a full-blown revolution.
C'est pas un statique ou multiplicatif. Là, le développement d'idées politiques nouvelles qui réclament une égalité de droits et qui veulent mettre fin aux privilèges liés à la naissance et à la noblesse.
In the French Revolution, the banner is liberty, equality, utility. It seems to be brotherhood, everyone's going to be free. But yet, within a tiny amount of time, you have this government of bankers, and what they do is start to create the elite once more.
This is the land of open liberty. Now when we fight, we fight every day. Here is the thing about equality. Everyone's equal when they're dead. Take your place, take your chance. Feed the fight, feed the fight.
Finalement, la Révolution française est basée en partie sur l'hypocrisie. On a une vision de l'égalité qui est un peu optimiste, un peu naïve et pire, un peu cynique. On fait semblant de croire que l'égalité va se mettre en place naturellement, spontanément, un peu comme dans un conte de fées. Mais en réalité, c'est qu'il faut aussi des institutions politiques, un système d'éducation, un système de santé, un système de transport, un système fiscal qui met à contribution les plus hauts patrimoines. Et tout ça, au XIXe siècle et au moment de la Révolution française, c'est pas du tout mis en place.
It replaces the work of people's hands with machines. So you bring in machines to make wool, to make cotton, to make all kinds of commodities. This makes things faster, standardizes them, and this makes more profit.
It's like capital is no longer this fixed thing. That's your land or even your ability to lend money. You finally figure out that you can expand your own factory by kind of selling stuff, keeping the profits, and reinvesting those profits in expanding your factory. And that's kind of what capitalism in modern form really lets us do, is that capital becomes this thing that perpetually expands. But the gap between wages and productivity is substantial, and you have these kind of feudal legacies of labor persisting very, very late into the game. British Master Servant Law meant that it was a crime for you to quit your employer without permission. And this is getting actively used in the mid-19th century during the heyday of capitalism in England, most advanced country in the world, and they're throwing workers in jail and they're being beaten because it's time to go on strike.
This whole idea developed around escaping the whole world and setting up a new egalitarian society. When the new world countries were being set up, so New Zealand, Australia, Canada, these places were being set up by these refugees fleeing Europe at a time that capitalism was really taking hold. And that's why a lot of people wanted to get out of these countries. They wanted a flat society. There was this idea of moving beyond the class system, but it was done largely in the Laissez-faire way. It wasn't a political movement by and large. And very quickly, it was the wealthy that started dominating right from the start.
If you're a white man observed like 1800-ish, Australia and the US, these places are like the best places for you to go. You've got wide open frontiers filled with land. But the big constraint on your production is your ability to mobilize labor. So if you're a small family farmer, the only labor you can mobilize onto the frontier is your kids. But if you're a slave owner, you can basically go to New Orleans, you can take out a loan, use that loan to buy a bunch of slaves in the New Orleans slave market, then take them out to the Alabama frontier and start clearing land and growing cotton. And you're again able to like take the profits from that and expand, buy more slaves, buy more land. And so you can again now think of the slave economy as participating in the circuit of accumulation. But also being a slave owner didn't just mean that you had access to the labor of your slaves, it also meant you had increased access to capital because you can use your slaves as collateral. So if you basically are looking to lend to somebody and they can offer an equivalent amount of slave collateral versus land, you prefer the slave collateral because it's much easier to move them around or resell them or something like that.
Ce moment du XIXe siècle est le moment où se met en place à l'échelle internationale un système de division du travail, d'inégalité, de domination. D'abord, le système esclavagiste, puis de domination coloniale, une violence inouïe. C'est très difficile de dire quelle partie de la richesse aujourd'hui du pays européen vient du passé colonial. Mais ce qui est certain, c'est que l'avantage décisif qui a été pris au moment de la révolution industrielle était intimement lié à une domination militaire.
Essentially, it's not dividing.
Mega political trend.
But it means that you have to change your model because capitalism is no longer about labor. The problem is if you look at driverless technologies, driving is, by the way, the single largest or second largest employer of people in every one of the 50 US states. And within 10 years, most of those jobs are gone. So you will address capital because if you don't, right, you are going to have very serious problems.
We're leaving an industrial economy and going to a post-industrial economy. And we have to make choices about which future we wind up in. You can have abundance that is very unequally distributed.